Hi team. Okay, so today's video is about the poem Those Winter Sundays, which is today's assignment. So right away I see that it's a poem. It's, pretty clear to spot them. They're a lot shorter. They come in what we call stanzas. These kind of like paragraph looking things are called stanzas. So right away I'm going to mark my thinking job. Oops, I'm going to move this down for you. Is poetry. And our jot for poetry is the literal meaning and the deeper meaning. If you have forgotten, the literal meaning of a poem is what the poem actually says is happening. So for literal, I'm going to say like what it says. And then you want to know what the deeper meaning is. Poets write poetry to give you some kind of theme or message. So all along we can keep tracking for like what is the deeper or metaphorical, the kind of figurative meaning. We talked about figurative language earlier this year, and we want to figure out, like the words might have a meaning by themselves as they are, but then you also have to think about the context of how the author is using them and what they might be trying to convey to you, what kind of theme or message they might be trying to make you learn. So what I want to do first is just read through the poem as it is. With a poem, since it's so short, you always read it at least 3 times. The first time I want to just read it to read it. The second time I'm going to read it and track the literal meaning. Oops, I didn't really want to put it that far down. So literal meaning. And on the third read, we're going to read and track the deeper meaning. So here we go. Those Winter Sundays. First read. Sundays too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue-black cold. Then, with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather, made banked fires blaze. No one ever thanked him. I'd wake and hear the cold splintering, breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house. Speaking indifferently to him, who had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well. What did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? Okay, so now that I've read it through one time, just for, to get my mind settled on what this poem is doing and talking about, now I can start to break it down a little bit. So let's kind of scoot our paper over to the left. Sorry, I have a scribble here, but we'll get by. So now I'm going to read it one more time through, and I'm going to track the literal meaning, what the poem actually says. And I'm going to do that stanza by stanza. So let's read it stanza by stanza. Sundays too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue-black cold. Then with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather, made banked fires blaze. No one ever thanked him. So literally what's happening? Father gets up early. His hands hurt from working during the week. I know that because it says hands that ached from labor, which is work, in the weekday weather. So weekday is during the week. And he made banked fires blaze. So he starts a fire. And nobody in the house thanks him. for his work or for the fire. All right, stanza 1. So I'm going to kind of like block that off for stanza 1. Stanza 2. I'd wake and hear the cold splintering, breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house. So, literally, the speaker wakes up. He'd call, so the father calls her. She gets up and gets dressed, and she says, fearing the chronic angers of that house. So, I know what fear means. I'm not quite sure what chronic means, but I know that fear is being afraid or scared. Anger of that house. So, like, maybe people in the house fight a lot. So, like, she's afraid of arguments or anger. All right, and then stanza 3. Speaking indifferently to him, who had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well, what did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? All right, so literally, she speaks to her father. He had driven out the cold, meaning like he'd started the fire. He polished her shoes, so father polished shoes for her or him, for the speaker. And then, what did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? I mean, I guess the speaker just asks questions about love. I do want to point out that love here in this case, we're not talking like romantic love because it's between a speaker and their father, so this is more like family love. We can all relate to family love. Okay, so now I've read it through once just to get a feel for it. I read it through another time to get the literal meaning, what's actually happening, and now I'm going to read it my third time and track the deeper meaning. What messages or themes I think the author might be trying to convey to me. So let's try again. Sundays too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue-black cold. Then, with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather, made banked fires blaze. No one ever thanked him. Okay, so if I'm thinking about this stanza, I'm thinking the father gets up early, even on a Sunday, after he's worked hard all week long in the cold winter. And he's like aching in pain, so that he can start a fire for his family. So I might say the deeper meaning here, kind of like the messaging here, is that the father shows his love by caring for his family's needs. And that's shown by his starting of the fire. And when it says no one ever thanked him, I'm wondering if this means like his actions are unnoticed. Like the family doesn't really seem to acknowledge that he does this for them. They don't thank him. They don't really seem to acknowledge his efforts to help keep them, not only make an income for them by working throughout the week, but also keep them safe and warm on the weekends by starting fires. Oops, sorry. Just a little dog barking. Sadie. Here we go. Stanza 2. I'd wake and hear the cold splintering, breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house. Okay, so for this one, she's getting up slowly because her dad is calling her to like come downstairs, time to get up. And instead of thinking about the fact that like the house is warm and he has, you know, made a fire for them and is like caring for her by waking her up in the morning, she is more concerned about like the arguments or bad times that her family has had. She's not really thinking about what he's doing for her now. All right, let's see if this theme kind of comes together once we read the third stanza. Speaking indifferently to him, who had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well, what did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? Okay, here's the tough one. So if she's speaking indifferently to him, when you speak indifferently to someone, it means like you're not showing any emotion. So at first, she kind of treats him, she treats him like she's angry, kind of like cold shoulder, right? She just kind of says like, good morning, or whatever she says. She treats him coldly. Even though he was the one who had started the fire for her, he polished her good shoes for her, and she already acknowledged that nobody thanks him for these things. So she treats him coldly, even though he takes good care of her. And then she wonders to herself, what did I know? What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? Now, I don't know what austere means, and I don't really think that love has like offices the way that like Mr. Davis has an office. But I do see that like love in this case could be lonely because the father is like caring for his family and showing his love, but they're not really showing it back. So the father is experiencing a lonely kind of love. It's not given back to him. Okay, so now that we've read through it 3 times, we've figured out the literal meaning and the deeper meaning. Now it's your turn to come up with what you think the overall, the theme or message of the poem is. What does this poet want us to kind of walk away from the poem thinking or believing about the subjects in the poem? So I'm going to leave you to do the theme on your own, and I'll start another video with the multiple choice questions. All right, tune in.